I'm Erica.
And I'm CJ.
And you're listening to the Her Podcast.
Today's episode is a very special one as we sit down with Pam and Taryn Hutchings, who are not just advocates, but a powerful mother-daughter duo dedicated to ending the stigma surrounding mental health. Pam and Taryn are the inspiring minds behind Teens Talk YXE, which is a platform aimed at opening candid discussions, breaking down barriers, and fostering greater understanding and support for mental health in teens. Pam is also a seasoned social worker with a wealth of experience in mental health and addiction programs, and her amazing daughter Taryn is a bright and talented teen in grade 10. In today's episode, we talk about things like brain pain, OCD, anxiety, depression, attempted suicide, and being admitted to the Dubé Center. We walk through Taryn's experience being disassociated from reality, having hallucinations, feeling compulsions to harm herself and others, hearing voices, and how that led to a diagnosis of functional neurological disorder. You guys, this one is a little bit heavy, but it's an important conversation that needs to happen around teens and mental health. So please take care as you listen today.
Well, we're really excited you're here.
Thank you.
I spent some time just I was going to say configuring, but I went and just spent some time this morning while I had my coffee while none of my kids were awake. It was magical. Just spent some time on your Instagram again, just to really refresh my memory with your story. Because obviously we got connected with your page quite a while ago. Mm-hmm. I feel actually
almost back when you guys started, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And so I think what we'd really love to start with, CJ, just interject if you need, is Taryn, if you'd be willing to share your story with us over the last 14 months, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have that number right.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. It becomes all a bit of a whirlwind. If you'd be willing to share your story with us in as much detail as you'd like.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
And maybe like a little bit of like what your story looked like, before your first sort of episode and what those symptoms were like, you know, like you are, I'm going to ask you a couple questions actually.
Okay, yeah.
You're in grade 10
currently
now, right? Were you in grade 9?
I was like this
was the summer.
It was the summer before grade 9.
Okay. So the summer before grade 9.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what was going on in your life and then we'll start from there. And Mom, you can interject too, because you know some of the details.
So I was doing really well. I had a slight anxiety and OCD, but they weren't really affecting my day to day. I was having a really good summer, actually, hanging out with friends lots. It was just like a very fun summer.
Taryn was actually the grade 8 valedictorian for her SAGE class in Saskatoon, which is a gifted learners program. I always have to throw that out there. She's very smart and had won like tons of dance competitions and piano awards. Like she was thriving in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So then what happened?
Then we were actually at the cabin for our yearly like family gathering. And me and Mom had gotten into like a little bit of a fight that day. I was at the beach not feeling very like self-confident, and it was just kind of a rough day, but not that bad of a day. So I was just laying in my bed, and all of a sudden I just like had this massive urge to just like swallow my pills that were sitting there. And I had never had this happen before. I took care of my meds for like a couple months already, and I was fine.
Sorry, what were your meds for?
Anxiety. They were anxiety meds.
Okay, so when did you get diagnosed with anxiety?
Well, she wasn't diagnosed at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, we just were noticing she had some like anxious thoughts and some tendencies, and what she was communicating with me was a lot less than what was actually going on though. So we had started with therapy. She was going to see a counselor regularly, and that wasn't really helping much. So then we had talked to our GP, and she had suggested, why don't we just go on a low grade dose of SSRIs and just see if that helps. And I was very anti-medications because I came from the mental health world with adults, and I was just like, don't know if I want to go to meds yet. But once I learned more, I was like, okay, I understand that this is actually like helping the transmitters in the brain, and like got real scientific about it. And that made me feel a lot better. And so that's what she had started on, just a low dose of anxiety meds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in your cabin and you're having like a very intrusive thought, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And at the time, I didn't realize that it was actually voices in my head. I just thought like, oh, this is off. Something's off. And then actually I went and I called my grandma in because as me and mom were having a bit of a fight, I didn't really want to talk to mom right now. They were all sitting around the campfire. So I said, Grandma, can you come in? Grandma being my grandma was like, of course. And I just told her like, hey, I'm not really doing well. Like I'm feeling a little bit like suicidal. I'm not doing good. I'm sure she was very, very shocked because this was the first time that had really come up. But she handled it so well. She was saying, like, we don't love you any less. It was really awesome. Not awesome. It was really great, the reaction she had. And then she called mom in. We had a little bit of a talk. I think mom kind of went into, like, her mom mode and kind of forgot about everything else and just got really into it. And she got all the meds locked up and she got my grandma to take the knives away. And we basically were just having, like, a...
So my mom says that she could physically see me switch into work mode because at that point I was a crisis counselor at Mobile Crisis and we did suicide risk assessments all the time. And she's like, she could see me like transform into professional mode and be like, okay, we need to check all these boxes to see, are we making a good safety plan? And I actually went outside and called a coworker at like 11 p.m. and was like, hey, it's a bit different because it's my own kid. So can you help me see this clearly? And
which is so smart that you did that. You had someone to kind of walk you through to affirm what you were doing, right?
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, I wanted to make sure I was thinking straight because I didn't think I was thinking straight at that time. And she agreed with me like, yeah, you guys made a good plan. You don't need to rush back to Saskatoon tonight. Let's just make a safe environment and get through the night kind of thing and then reassess. So that's what we did.
Yes. And I remember me and mom decided that we were going to talk to the whole family about it. And I remember my uncle, he put his arm on me and he was praying for me. And I remember that being like significant for me. It was just like affirming that like my family has my back and they're going to support me no matter what.
You know, I want to just quickly interject and ask something because so what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this kind of came out of like left field. Like this was like having a bad day, but probably not even remotely on your radar that this was the conversation you're going to have. So I'm curious because I think we have a lot of moms listening. And I think sometimes as parents, I have 4 kids, they're little, but we can get into almost, I don't want to say this, but like you took her serious immediately.
Right.
Why was that?
Well, I didn't take her serious the first time because she actually, I don't know if you forgot this, but she came out to the window and asked me to come in at first. And she was like, Mom, I need to talk to you. And I was like, no, I'm by the fire. I'm having a drink. I'm listening to music. I'm good. Like if you want to talk to me, come out here and talk to me. And so then she came back. Do you remember that? Yeah. Then she came back and called Grams. And of course, Grams went. And then my mom came and she had this look on her face and was like, you need to come inside. And so that's when I knew, okay, this isn't just a normal conversation. Something is up. And it was just such like an earth shattering feeling because she had never mentioned anything like that before. And so I was just probably in shock a little bit, but I'm good in crisis situations because it was my job and I can just compartmentalize. I put my feelings to the side and get the job done.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, it's, you know, sometimes you look at these situations and you're like, maybe you wouldn't have taken her serious if you had gone in, because I'm a mom and I know what it's like to be sitting around and going, just if you need something, come here, right? Like I'm comfy, I'm at the lake. Like I understand completely. And instead you almost had that middle person to come and be like, hey, let's level for a second. Something's going on. Yeah.
My mom was a really big intermediary in that moment. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So then you're at the cabin and your family's surrounding you, which is so beautiful. And what an amazing just testimony to like your whole crew. So then what happened the next day?
So we packed up our things and it wasn't really like a rush, but we went home. I took a shower and then we were like, hey, we should go into the hospital, right?
Well, that's when you first admitted to me that it wasn't actually you feeling suicidal. It was that you had voices in your head saying that you should die. And she told me that it sounded like a choir of people singing, die, 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 over and over. So then I was like, okay, this is not quote unquote normal, like we better get to the hospital to see what's actually going on.
I remember getting to the hospital, going into a merge was not fun. We got put in the ICR room, which we nicknamed the death room because it just had 4 white walls, a single mattress, and that was all in there.
Oh.
Safety.
Yes,
Yeah.
for
Okay.
safety, but
Yes.
it was
Okay.
like
Psychologically damaging being in there for 10 hours.
yes.
Which you can see photos of
Yep.
in your highlights.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, we were in there many times
Yes.
over the next month. Yeah. So initially, we spent forever in there telling our story to every single human is what it felt like, because they didn't know anything about us. We had never presented to the ER before. And eventually at like 10 o'clock at night, the resident on call gave us, well, through the actual psychiatrist, but we dealt with the resident, just gave us like pretty heavy cocktail of meds to try and just said, okay, you know what? There's no room here for you guys right now. Take these meds because of what I do for work. I felt comfortable trying again at home and go home and see if that helps. So that's what we did. And the next 2.5 days were like an absolute nightmare. I'm not sure how much you remember.
I don't remember very much.
Can I ask, like, do you feel disassociated from some of these memories?
Definitely, because I was on so many meds. So, like, I remember when my mom tells me about it, but off the top of my head, I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the memories she said were like, are starting to come back now a little bit
Yes.
more. But like if he would have talked to us in like March or April,
no.
a lot of things were blurry. And as the same for me, actually, who wasn't on meds, but traumatic experiences can have that effect, right? Where we just sort of numb out and don't recall certain things.
Something that I do want to say I remember very clearly on that first hospital visit was having to be pinned down. That was something that, like, it was the first time that for once I wasn't in control. And it wasn't like a bad holding out. It was just like my arm, but I just felt so powerless at that moment. And I was like, me and Mom were both like crying, and that was just something that like has stuck with me, and it wasn't fun.
Yeah, her thoughts turned from like harming herself to harming me because I was trying to keep her safe, and so these voices would say, "Okay, now you need to like hurt your mom then, so that you can hurt yourself," kind of thing.
Wow.
And it got to a point where I couldn't pin her down alone, so we actually had to call security, and we did to pin her down. And it was one of those like defining moments for me too, Taryn. Her crying and looking at me saying, "I don't want to hurt you, Mama. Like I would never hurt you." But there was this like rage inside her that we couldn't control. And so we tried to go home, and every single second Taryn tried to hurt herself in some way or the other. So she was banging her head against the wall, biting herself everywhere. I stepped out to the front porch for 1 second, came back in, and she had a knife out and was cutting her wrists already. At that point I was like, okay, I'm gonna remove every knife and sharp from this entire house. And from there it was like, okay, these meds are not working. We did 2 days like that. She slept in my room. I was like on guard 24/7. And so we went back in, and that's the first time that she got admitted into the Dubé. First out of 9 times.
Wow.
Okay, and now I'm curious about this because you're a minor, and do they not have a child Dubé center?
Yep.
Yeah, it's the
Oh, it is. Okay.
yeah, it's the adolescent.
Okay, so there is like a children's ward.
Yep.
Thank
'Cause
goodness.
I was watching the stories where you were like, you got to stay at JCPH. And I mean, I've had a couple experiences with JCPH just with my kids needing surgery, and it is such a like,
Beautiful.
it feels magical. Like
Totally.
they did such an incredible job. And I saw that story where you were like,
Yeah.
why can't we be here?
Yeah.
Because just it's such a different environment. So I was curious if the Dubé Center had a children's ward essentially.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, they do. 10 beds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That does not feel like enough.
No, it's definitely not enough, and it's definitely felt like we got the crappy end of the deal compared to JPCH. Those kids should have been included in that hospital because it just further stigmatizes that
Yes.
mental health should be a separate thing from whole body health. So
It's all the lights for me. Oh, which is funny.
just like the mood in here,
Yes.
environment matters.
yeah.
And when we were staying in peds, which is because she had overdosed, so we needed to stay in peds to monitor her physically. both of our moods immediately lifted, and we had a big window to look out of, and we put the pink on in her room, and it was just like, wow, we feel like we're staying at like, the Delta or something.
Yeah. They're very intentional over there. I found very intentional.
Definitely.
Yes. Okay, so this was your first time being checked into the Doob.
Yep.
And walk us through what that was like.
So,
and how long you were there for.
Yes. So I remember the long walk from Emerge to the duvet. It was like a solid 10-15 minute walk.
Yeah.
And I just remember like every step I was like, oh my goodness. And the nurses, they took us and they showed us my room. And I just remember me and Mom sitting on the bed just like bawling our eyes out. Everyone was like the nurses were like, do you want a tour? We're like, no, we're actually like crying right now.
We're not well. We're not handling this. Like,
what were you guys feeling?
Well, I know I was just like terrified because I didn't understand what was going on with me. I remember thinking like, am I going crazy? Do I have this like really bad mental health disorder? At one point I'm like, did I get possessed or like something really bad was going on?
Yeah. We were just literally terrified. And I remember just breaking at that point and just sobbing uncontrollably. And I remember the nurses looking at us being like, what is going on with them? Like, I felt like they were like thinking like, this feels like a bit of an overboard reaction. But we were also like incredibly sleep deprived. It'd been 4 nights of like, I was awake every night on suicide watch. So I know I was so overtired, and that played into it. And it was just so scary. So the first night I stayed with her there, which they didn't want me to do, but I'm like, I'm not leaving her here. And then she was in there for 6 days, and we got onto a new medication plan, and we were discharged thinking, we're done. We're never coming back. We bought a huge bouquet of flowers for all the staff and wrote a thank you card. And we're like, thank you so much for supporting us through this.
And sorry, how many days was it?
6.
It was only 6.
Yeah. And we just thought for sure we would never be back. Like 100%, right?
Yeah. We were like, oh, yay.
I like the confidence.
Yeah.
I really like the confidence.
Yeah. But like
it was like almost misleading. Like the doctors didn't warn us that like there's a good chance that it's still going to be there.
Yeah, I don't think that was their intention, but we were just very naive also at that point.
Yes.
Well, and at this point, you still didn't know what was going on.
No clue. Nobody knew.
Like there was no diagnoses.
No, at that point, they were still like, we're not sure, but we think maybe OCD could be doing this. And so I am a research nerd, and I got on the internet and scoured the depths of the internet to find a case that had been similar to Taryn's. And I couldn't find anything, like nothing that related from these type of hallucinations and OCD being the cause. So it was really confusing. And then we came home, and that just began like a cycle of home for a few days. Symptoms would change and flare up, back to the hospital, admitted, and symptoms usually would calm down while we were there. And so then she would stay for a bit. They'd say she's stable. She changed meds 12 times, I think, in the first year.
Well, and like, can we just talk about that for a minute? Because I know, from personal experience, only changing a handful of meds, how much that can interact with your body. And so I can't even imagine being, a teenager and having to feel some of the side effects possibly.
Oh yeah, I was so nauseous all the time.
Yeah, we talk about it at our sharing circles a lot, about how nobody knows all the side effects that you have to deal with when you go on meds, and especially multiple meds. So then you're dealing with multiple side effects. Then they suggest putting you on meds to deal with the side effects. And you're just like, where do we draw the line? And so many really tough symptoms for Taryn followed that.
I remembered when we went to pick up the meds, we had a certain experience. This person looks at the dosage of my meds. He like announced to everyone, he was like, this is such a high dose of meds. Like, you're going to gain weight and you're not going to get it off.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Very encouraging.
I was in shock because at the time the psychiatrist and Mom agreed not to tell me that weight gain was going to happen. I was like in shock. We never went there again.
Yeah, we switched pharmacies. It wasn't a very good experience.
No, that's really difficult. What are some of the side effects that you have experienced? You mentioned nauseous.
Super nauseous. and like so tired. Slash on some points I had to take sleeping meds to be able to sleep. But like super drowsy. I did end up gaining quite a bit of weight, which was definitely the hardest side effect for me because it was like actually not my fault.
Yeah.
I still struggle with that one right now. So
Yeah.
that was definitely not a fun side effect.
Not a great thing at teenager years,
No.
right? When you're already having body issue struggles, as every teenager does.
Yeah.
No, and just like the hormonal changes that you're going through and just time of life where you're figuring yourself out. Like, again, I can't imagine walking through some of what you've been through, Taryn.
Honestly, I don't know how I did it. When I'm thinking back, I'm like, oh, how did I do this?
One day at a time.
That's right.
Yeah.
One moment.
Hey friends, it's CJ, and I want to tell you guys about my favorite place to stay when I come to Saskatoon. It's Melrose Place. It's the cutest Airbnb in Saskatoon. Let me tell you guys, the details in this space are everything from the stunning decor and beautiful high quality furnishings to the thoughtful touches in each room. Melrose has taken this Airbnb to the next level. I've had the pleasure of staying in Melrose quite a few times now, and every time I walk away impressed and refreshed. Let me tell you about some of the details. Melrose sleeps up to 4 people in 2 bedrooms. It has 2 bathrooms, space to entertain with a full kitchen, dining area, and living room. So whether you're looking to plan a fun getaway to Saskatoon, visiting family, or in need of a staycation, Melrose is the place to stay. Melrose is in the best location. It's close to all the amenities in a beautiful neighborhood, and it's a perfect place to stay for also work trips like me, or just because. Find Melrose Place on Instagram at Melrose Place YXE, that's MELROSE Place YXE, or by searching Melrose Place in Saskatoon on Airbnb. We've included the link to book in our show notes, so also just scroll down and click there for ease.
I'm really curious. This just popped into my head because we're talking about you being a teenager. How was this with friends? Like, how was this with community? Was this something, I mean, I know you share on social media, but at the time, was this something that people were willing to try to understand? Were you experiencing, I'm just curious about your relationships, really.
Well, I didn't really see many people. Like, my grandma came over quite a bit, but it wasn't like we were going to hang out with anyone. I know that my friendships definitely really struggled this last year because some of my friends didn't really know that I was in the hospital. They didn't know for how long, so then they thought I was just, like, ignoring them. So definitely friendships took a big hit.
That's hard.
Yes.
It was tough because it wasn't like it was just like a month or two. At that point, after a month or two, everything was still kind of intact because she was able to, in October of last year, she had kind of like a good 3 weeks. So she had like hung out with friends, had a sleepover or two, kind of, we were like, oh, okay, maybe we're through the thick of it. And then when you are sick and it lasts months and months and months, things change around you because your support system is still there, but people don't understand how it's like such a grind every single day. And it's hard to walk alongside someone that long, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I would imagine, I mean, I've never been ill in any real capacity for a length of time. And I feel like, and maybe you can speak to this, I wonder what the difference would be between beside walking someone who maybe has, let's say, cancer compared to mental health. And when you're in a center where you probably, I don't know, I've never been, so just again, correct me, like probably not a lot of communication happening. Like you're really working on your mental state. And so there isn't probably a lot of energy to be trying to still communicate. And I'm not saying people who like have cancer have mental state to talk to, but I feel like maybe that would look a little different with staying connected.
Yeah, well, you're not allowed to phone in the debate.
Okay, this is what I'm trying to get at here.
Yes.
Thank you for confirming.
So it was really hard to communicate with people. And I think with this kind of thing, people don't know how to react. They're very sorry. They're just like, oh, I'm sorry. And then they don't really know how to go about talking with me. It was also hard because when I was out of the debate, I made plans and I had to cancel a lot of plans. I was feeling so good. I was like, oh yeah, let's go to Tim's or something. And then it turned around and I had to cancel 20 minutes before it happened.
Yeah, that happened regularly. So that's hard on friendships. And I've shared this with other people before, but navigating through a mental health, I don't like the word illness, but pain is so much different than physical, because there just still is the shame and stigma attached to it, even though we're all fighting hard to reduce that. I know that it was more challenging in certain settings and circumstances to try to explain what was happening, because symptoms are not a fever or throwing up or a broken leg or something very obvious. It's behavioral often, right? So then it got confused with, well, is she just choosing to act this way? And it's like, no, this is a symptom of her mental health, but unfortunately it comes out as behaviors, which then it's confusing that this is maybe something she's choosing to do. And that really impacted our community, I think, in a way, because it's hard to understand.
Yeah. And I didn't want to talk about it, because it was like, oh, I'm hallucinating every day, and not something I want to share at that point.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious, because I want to circle back to that and to how you came to the place where you really did want to be open and share. But I'm curious, we were back at, sort of your first time in the Dubai Center. Yes. But if you can walk us through how that sort of progressed and you continued to go back, the symptoms that you were having, and where you sort of got to a place where I know you guys went to LA to the Amen Clinic, which I'm very interested in hearing about, because I've listened to a lot of his podcasts and information. So
yes, my symptoms just kept morphing. It started with just auditory and visual hallucinations, and then it shifted to dissociative episodes, and there was even tactical hallucinations, which is when you feel things on your body that aren't there. And there were
like Taryn thought, she literally believed for weeks that she had been shot and had a gunshot wound and was bleeding out.
I felt the pain.
She felt the pain, and she would be screaming at the top of her lungs, being like, "Can't you see the blood, Mom? I'm bleeding everywhere." And then she felt bugs crawling all over her. She would see things all over. She saw dead pink unicorns that were half bloody. And they just kept evolving, like she said, and morphing into something new. So then every time it was something that I didn't know how to deal with, I would call our psychiatrist and our community mental health nurse, who were incredible supports to me. I know to Taryn too, but I'm the one that making the call hysterical, what is happening to my child? And they would walk me through a few things. We would try those things. Sometimes we do a med change over the phone, because I tried really hard to keep her out of the hospital. And then every time it became unmanageable, the thing is, everything revolved around safety with her. It was always about keeping her safe. And so it came to the point where she thought I was kidnapping her. She would dissociate and think I was a complete stranger. And at first I would say, "I'm your mom. It's okay." And then that would set her off even more, because she's like, "You're not my mom." So then I stopped saying that, and I learned, and I said, "I'm just a mental health therapist, and this is a safe space, and look at our cute dog. It's so she's so cozy." And she'd be like, "Oh, okay." And that helped her get through those moments a lot better.
My dog helped so much from the hours laying on me, being able to pet her. But sometimes I would get mad at her and push her and scream at her. And I feel to this day, I still feel bad about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes she would run away. Just bolt out the house, because she literally thought I had kidnapped her. Taryn would run away
in the cold, I'd be in my pajamas, just bolting down the street,
screaming at the top of her lungs. I'm sure we provided a lot of entertainment on our little street.
And Mom, again, Pam, you obviously are a social worker and deal with mental health crises. Yeah. But I remember reading a quote from one of your captions, and it was I'm obviously not going to quote it correctly, and so you can correct me, but it was something along the lines of it's very different to walk your own child through some of these crises compared to, people that are not your child.
Yeah, because I couldn't shut my emotions off the same way. Whereas when I go to the scene of something that's traumatic and or a tragedy, I could easily flip a switch and put my feelings off, and I'm just specialized in that way, which has isn't actually a great way to be all the time, but it did make me good in crisis. But with Taryn, usually when things were really bad, I was okay, but it started to feel more personal, some of her things that she would do, and obviously screaming at me I'm not you're not my mom, and get away, like just a lot of really hurtful things that I know she didn't mean. But in those moments, it was like, okay, this sucks. This is not my girl. This is not my daughter. Right. And so as every time a new symptom would come up, we would go back in, and that's when she would be admitted, because they too would be like, we don't understand. We don't know what's going on. None of the meds seem to help. So we keep on changing, as slow as we have to, because you have to titrate off.
And I was on such high doses of those meds.
Yeah.
Are they at this point like running tests?
Not really for the first couple of months, because they really did think it was OCD. And then as we kept coming back, and around December is when they started to be like, okay, maybe we do need to think outside the box. And I had started to compile very bizarre questions to be like, is this Lyme disease? Is this...
Yeah, though, why not?
Yes, and mostly because of the 180 switch of how it started to present. It wasn't like a leading up. It was just like, bam, one day everything is different, right? So yes, in November they had started to run like a lot of different tests on Taryn to try to figure out what the heck was going on, and that's when we did come up with the doctors came up with a new diagnosis,
which was
FND, functional neurological disorder.
Tell me more.
So actually, in most cases, it's physical. So it can like trick your mind into thinking like you're having seizures, and would have a seizure, but it wouldn't actually harm anything in your brain. So I had that, but it was more psychiatric. Like it was, you're seeing things that aren't actually there, or you're feeling pain that aren't actually there. And I mean, to this day, it still confuses the crap out of me on how that's possible.
Yeah, it's a very difficult and confusing diagnosis. And one of the first psychiatrists like looked at me and was like, yeah, it's really hard. And I'm like, well, what do I do? Where do I go? Where do I learn? What next? And she's like, yeah, it's just really tough. I was like, this is not...
You're supposed to have the answer.
You're like, okay, broken record. Can you give me something new here?
Yeah.
At least own up and be like, I'm not sure what the next step is.
Yeah. And we eventually found an expert in the psychiatry department in Saskatoon that shared a bunch more information with us and was really wonderful. But it is just such a difficult diagnoses to understand, because it's basically just a disconnect between your brain and body, and your brain is sending you the wrong messages. It used to be called conversion disorder, so that might be more known to other people. Yes. And then it's switched to functional neurological disorder.
Yeah, it took a long time to get diagnosed. Like I was in hospital for Halloween. I remember we raised money and ordered pizza and got a bunch of new art supplies, and we did reverse trick-or-treating. So we went around handing the other patients and people, giving them candy. And then I remember being there on Christmas Eve. My grandma and grandpa and my mom came over, and we had Christmas Eve, we had noodle bowls, I think. Yeah. And every Christmas Eve, Mom would always give me a pair of pajamas. That's like our tradition, being Carter. So I went quickly back and changed, and it was definitely tough to not.
Yeah, being over there during Christmas was the lowest point, I would say.
Yeah, it was so difficult, especially because there's not a whole lot of cheer that they put into the day.
Yeah, and she did get a day pass on Christmas Day, and we went and spent the morning at home, myself, Taryn, and Carter, like we always do, and opened presents, and that was really wonderful. And then we headed over to my mom's house and had a family get together, and that was actually Taryn's first overdose on Christmas Day with the whole family. And those things that happened, she overdosed 2 times. And both times she like told me immediately after and was like, Mom, it doesn't feel like it's me when that's happening. I have no control. Just I go and do it. And then immediately I'm like, what did I do? I need to go tell Mom. So
first time wasn't very severe because it was just Advil. I still have to drink charcoal, and charcoal is the most disgusting thing of life. I do not recommend.
This will not be on her next Starbucks order. No. Do not recommend charcoal. Good to know.
Yeah, so charcoal coats the stomach, and then so anything that you've ingested that you don't want to absorb into your lining, it essentially just coats the stomach. And so it wasn't a good experience still. So after we got that diagnosis, there didn't feel like we still had a lot of supports and like plans. It's like, okay, so now we know what we're dealing with, but where next? We're still in hospital all the time.
Well, it almost, I imagine, feels like a slight possible amount of relief from getting a diagnosis, but then an equal amount of weight being like, well, now what do we do with this?
And I didn't know anyone that had the same diagnosis as me. Like, I never heard of a case like I had.
Yeah. That was the other problem. I started to research too, and I'm like, okay, so where has it presented with psychiatric symptoms that I can look at and see what you maybe did to resolve this? So I'm an outside of the box thinker. I like to think I am. And would you agree?
Yes.
And my mom had actually read some books by Daniel Amen. And you know, I'm just such a believer that like things align and doors open and just things happen for a reason. And my mom had heard from like her audiologist that I don't know, because Taryn's story would come up in conversation all the time. And she was at an appointment and someone had said, my niece actually has gone. And then she told me about that. And from there, it's like when you get told about a red car and then all you see is red cars. Yeah. I heard from a few people who had gone and had really good success at an Amen clinic. So I just was like, okay, I'm going to make a call and just see. And so I did the consult.
Well, for people who aren't familiar with an Amen clinic, can you maybe give us a little bit of what it is?
Yeah, sure. So Daniel Amen is like a really famous, he's even been on Dr. Phil, he's written a ton of books, psychiatrist. And if you go onto their website, it says psychiatry done differently. And their whole piece de resistance is that they do special brain scans. So Taryn had an MRI and a CT scan, which looks at the structural integrity of your brain, and everything was fine, which is great. We were like, praise God, nothing, there's no tumor, there's no nothing in, and a SPECT scan, it's SPECT. Do not ask me what that stands for.
I will not.
Single photon emission, something. It looks at the functioning of the brain. And so I had been saying for months that Taryn's brain is on fire. That was like my tagline. And it's like, it doesn't stop ever. It's on fire. I don't know what's going on. And they look at, you know, where is the brain overactive? When is it overactive? And can really like hone in on the different parts of the brain and then make a treatment plan based on that. And when I had made the consult call, they actually had a functional neurological disorder specialist in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Yes.
How amazing.
It was amazing. So we spoke with him for half an hour and he was pretty convinced it was FND and really convinced that Taryn would benefit from having that scan and looking to see exactly what was happening inside her brain. And he was so confident that he could help. And at that point, we felt like we hadn't had a plan and that nobody could really help. And to be honest, I was like straight up desperate.
Yeah, you probably would have gone to the ends of the earth, right?
100%.
To try anything.
Yeah,
at that point.
The doctors had even said, "Okay, Pam, you need to stop like turning over so many stones because like if something new happens with Taryn, we will follow that route, but you need to stop." And I'm like, I can't. I can't as a mom stop. I'm going to continue until we figure out what is happening with my girl.
And thank goodness you did. Because I don't know where we'd be if we didn't go to LA.
Yeah. LA, we say LA was like our TSN turning point.
Okay. Yeah. So what was LA like?
LA was, well, first of all, I got to see the Hollywood sign when you drove or the plane flight over it. So that was pretty cool. But I was very nervous. We went there. I actually had a really bad episode where I was hyperventilating and I actually broke a painting that was there.
In the hotel?
In the hotel.
That like, you guys were staying at?
Yeah. Screaming. It was late at night. And then I remember, like, would not stop. And then as soon as I did it, I, like, collapsed in bed and fall asleep. They were really good about it. They just made us, like, move rooms and, like, that was fine. Right? Is that what happened?
Yes.
Mom's perspective might be a little different. I can't imagine having an episode in a, like, I'm going to say air quotes, public space, like a hotel that's not your own home and feeling... I don't know what you would be feeling. Right?
Yeah, we were so nervous to take Taryn because we barely could manage in our home environment where we had made everything as safe as possible. And so my mom, thank God, came with me. But I felt like I had to physically pin Taryn down many times to keep her from hurting herself or something else. And so not a lot of other people could step in. It felt like it had to be me. My mom was there really for my emotional support. And so we were terrified. That's just the honest truth. And we drugged her up even more. The flight was okay.
I was going to ask, like, I feel like getting on a plane would have been like...
Well, yeah. And then we had to like run at one point and then we were going to be late. Like anything extra that could cause more stress, I was so worried about for Taryn. And so, but you did really well on the flight.
Yes, I actually did. I remember running there and me and Grams were like just walking casually and there's Mom in the front like sprinting as fast as she can to get to the next plane.
Yeah, like because we flew in the night before and we had our first scan at 9 a.m. the next day, and I'm like, this is a medical emergency. Move out of the way.
But the flight was actually good. I don't remember anything bad. I mean, I was on a lot of medication, but I remember just enjoying it because I have never been to LA before. So
yeah. And so the first night we actually had a stars tour kind of booked, but I got food poisoning and was so sick, throwing up and like having to use the bathroom. But I'm like, I'm not letting this get in the way of Taryn missing out on the one cool thing we're gonna do while we're in LA. So I hopped up on the Imodium and we enjoyed a stars tour through the Beverly Hills.
It was so cool, and thank goodness we did, because we were planning on actually going to the Santa Monica Pier the next day because that was on my bucket list. We didn't actually get to go.
I had my engagement photos there.
Really?
Yeah.
So cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So then the next day we went and got the scan done, which was fascinating to see. And we didn't actually see anything that day, I guess. Yeah. We got the 2 scans done, one at rest and one being stimulated.
Can I ask what the scans were like? Like, are they like MRI, like CT scan? Like, are they loud? Are they like, how are we feeling in?
Yep, exactly like an MRI.
Claustrophobic?
No, you actually don't move all the way in. It's a machine that wraps around your head and you just lay on the outside.
We had to get an IV with like, dye?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one was done when she was resting and one was done after being mentally stimulated.
And I found it way easy. Like when I got an MRI, I was feeling so claustrophobic and scared in there, but this was way better than that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so those went well. And then the second scan day, after that first day, we had to answer a bunch of questions with kind of the in-between between the psychiatrist and us. And at that point, we never talked about what Taryn was going through. Definitely not with Taryn.
Because it triggered me a lot.
Because it always brought on more things. And so we spent the day, she spent the day answering quite a few questions, and it was really hard for her to talk about. And then we went back to the hotel, and then sure enough, that sort of was the pre-amp to her having a really bad episode.
I remember answering all those questions. I don't really remember what they were or what it was like. I remember she gave me a fidget, and all I could think about remembering is that I was trying to hang it.
Hang in there?
No, like I was trying to hang the like, it was like a little figurine. I felt like,
Oh, like you were trying to physically strangle?
Yes, because that's how I felt about myself.
Okay.
That's the only thing I remember.
Yeah, that would have been incredibly difficult.
Yeah, well, it's not like me. Like, I'm not disturbing, like, like I would never do anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then we got back to the hotel, and I was trying to get her through a flare up, I guess is kind of what we called it. And this was the first time my mom had ever experienced one of these live, which was very, she actually wrote a post about it. I asked her if she wanted to share her perspective, because it's so different from someone from the outside witnessing kind of what we had to go through. And Taryn ended up shattering a picture on the wall, because a lot of the things were either like hurt herself or like break and destroy anything and then use the glass to hurt herself. So I felt it was like my job to pin her down to stop this from happening, which I learned later on was actually kind of probably negatively contributing to confirming to her brain that there was a problem, and that she should be scared and making it into a bigger deal than, like, I probably should have just let her work through the process on her own and deal with the consequence and make it be like not a big deal. But it's like, how do you do that? It just goes against everything as a mom.
No,
right?
Totally. I think anyone's gut reaction would be to do what you did.
Yeah, I think so too. But I was many times after that told, don't hold her down. She has to just let her break whatever. So that didn't jive with me very well. But anyways, the hotel was very gracious. This was actually a hotel sponsored or like affiliated with Amen clinics. So we got like a 10% discount. And so I was like, I feel like this isn't the first time probably things have happened. People are coming to this clinic because they're really struggling. So they were amazing. Just moved us into a new room, but it was tough. It was really tough.
What did you guys learn from the brain scans?
So we had a meeting the very next week with our psychiatrist, and so our Canadian psychiatrist in Saskatoon actually had interned at the Amen clinic, this exact one. So when we told her about the possibility of doing this, she was so supportive and really on board with it. And she's like, oh yeah, they didn't think maybe we had put in enough effort trying the supports in Canada first. But I'm like, listen, we're on month like 7 or 8. I can't wait around. We need to get this done. So our psychiatrist from Saskatoon joined a 2-hour Zoom meeting with our LA psychiatrist. So it was like a beautiful handoff of information.
I was actually watching in hospital because we got home from LA. I ran inside. I think I broke something maybe. And then my grandparents had dropped us off. They came right back and drove us. And I had got admitted that night.
Yeah.
Back into the Dubé.
Back into Dubé.
Okay.
Yeah. We had no time at home that was successful, it seemed like. And so we spent 2 hours going over these scans. And Taryn was actually like in the top 10% of high activity brain. And it was like to visually see her brain activated was so validating for me, because it was like, yes, I have been telling you that her brain is on fire, and this is now like living visual proof. Even when she was at rest, the scans were equal when her brain was stimulated and when she was at rest, and she was like way higher than normal people at rest.
Well, and I think what can be really difficult is for you to like, I don't know if we can say like gut or intuition, like know something, but not have like physical evidence to back it up. And so people come to you and they're like,
right,
you know, and how hard that can be to live with that weight and be like, no, like there is something going on here, and we need to be able to find the answer to get. So I'm assuming when you were able to be like, yes, like this is what I've been telling you guys, would have been so
validating, and reassuring, and like, okay, I wasn't chasing down the wrong tree or whatever. I did feel like I was on to something, and the scans just confirmed it. And he was able to pinpoint where her brain was lighting up more, and he actually did a complete medication change and put her on meds that our Canadian psychiatrist had never prescribed before. And he's like, we use this one all the time, and we've had major success with it because it was her temporal lobes that had to do with her ability to like ignore the urges and to not follow through, which is exactly like the impulse control. She could not stop the impulse control. And so, he just broke it down so specifically. And it was so beautiful to be able to listen to him support us and validate us and change how we were approaching her health.
Okay, everyone, for all my beauty enthusiasts, makeup newbies, and anyone in between, I need to share something exciting with you. Award-winning makeup artist Kelsey Ray has an incredible new offering that will help you streamline your skincare and makeup routine. Personalized makeup lists. Kelsey is my personal go-to makeup artist when I need my makeup done, and I know selecting the right skincare and makeup products can be overwhelming more often than not. Navigating a sea of products and cryptic labels can leave you feeling lost in your pursuit of that flawless, radiant glow. Don't worry, Kelsey has got you covered. I've actually had my fair share of sending her DMs while I'm in a store, showing her products and asking what she thinks of them. Begin your journey to luminous skin and a makeup collection tailored exclusively for you with a meticulously curated line of makeup products perfectly aligning with your wants and needs. Now here's how it works. You will fit out an in-depth form, but don't worry, it's fun, that covers everything from your skin type, tone, to your preferences for makeup that you already wear. Kelsey will then review your information and head to the drawing board, putting together the absolute best recommendations for you based on the information you shared. You'll receive a fully customized form inclusive of personalized recommended products, tips and tricks, and application advice from Kelsey. You'll be well on your way to feeling confident with your skincare and makeup products. You know we have a special offer for our Her crew. You can use code HER10 to save 10% off your personalized makeup list with Kelsey. Find and follow along with Kelsey on Instagram at KelseyRay_MUA and head to www.KelseyRayMakeup to book your personalized makeup list now. You can also find the link to book in our show notes. And remember to use that code HER10 to save.
Well, and I imagine then, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you would advocate for people to do everything that they need to do to, you know, because sometimes you have to, like you said earlier, think outside the box to get sort of the resources, unfortunately, you know, that you need.
Totally.
So, okay, at this point now we've switched medication.
Yep.
How is this new medication?
So we switched the meds, and then he actually prescribed a ton of supplements, and as well as like a nutrition plan and exercise plan. Like, it was a very holistic approach, which we loved.
Yes.
And so how did you feel about switching?
Honestly, I don't really remember.
That's why I'm kind of doing more of the talking
Yeah,
about this part
totally
of the story.
fine.
Yeah. So well, it took forever, of course, right? We had to phase off certain meds and go on to these other ones. And at that point, March 6th was her last discharge from the hospital. And it had gotten to a point where I could not do it by myself anymore. So I had to actually open a child protection file on myself in order to get supports, because I couldn't afford to pay out of pocket for anyone to come into the home to help. And I had already had to take 2 leaves of work. And at that point, I actually had to quit because I wasn't able to I couldn't work. Taryn was my full-time job for a whole year. And as a single parent, obviously there's still financial obligations. So I should mention that we had like an incredible outpouring of love and support. And we had a GoFundMe page made by my friends. And that's the only way we could afford to go to LA. So that was amazing.
It was really like magical almost.
It was magical. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got, was it Clear Cut? No.
Clear Health Solutions.
Clear Health Solutions. Anyways, so there were people staying the night with me every night.
5 nights a week.
5
we had a
nights a
support
week.
worker.
And then I had a worker that came during the day. We actually tried a couple. There was only one that had a really good fit. She's amazing. So she would just be there downstairs with me, doing all the coping things we could think. We were like popping balloons and like breaking boxes. Like we were doing anything we could think of. And I remember not liking her at all when she was first there, just because she was the one that was not letting me hurt myself, right? So I actually like did not want her there. I felt like it was a babysitter, which it kind of was. Did not like it, but by the end, I still to this day I really love her, because then when I was feeling better, we went like shopping together. And
Yeah. So Taryn had a support worker that became part of our family, because it was a very interesting experience to have someone like a total stranger move into your home. And we've been the 3 of us for 12 years now. And so it was like, okay, this is kind of, and we had a small house. So it was like very in our space.
It completely changes the dynamic to have a caregiver come into your home.
Totally. It was something I had never, ever gone through before. And having someone there at night even wasn't necessarily like restful for me, because I'm like, okay, now there's a stranger in my home at nighttime when we're trying to sleep. But we needed the support, and it was the only way I could get back to doing a few things in my life and help Taryn navigate through some of the challenges.
it was either stay in hospital,
Yeah.
or get support at home. And me and Mom both pushed so that we didn't want to be in a hospital anymore.
Yeah.
No, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you now would have possibly switched to these new meds.
Yes.
You have an
Yeah.
in-home care worker that's coming in. Where do we go from here?
So March-ish, when you were discharged, we also decided we really wanted to get Taryn back to school and sort of some type of functioning. Part of FND is the way to treat it is actually to carry on. So kids that sometimes will like lose the ability to walk or to see, you have to like very minimally react. And basically, this is another thing that goes against your ingrained system, but basically disregard what's happening. And so Taryn would be like, oh, this is happening. I'd be like, okay, cool. You know what to do. Or like busy doing dishes or whatever.
Which made me very, very, very mad. I'd be screaming at her because I just didn't understand why she wasn't helping me.
Yeah, I felt like I wasn't being supportive for what she's going through, but what we were instructed to do was just to like totally downplay what was happening so that her brain would get the message that this isn't anything to be worried about and you need to just carry on. So we made a plan with the high school in our town to have Taryn come back to school in person, because she had done all of grade 9 online, which was challenging.
Very.
And the intention was to have her be able to function without me, and to integrate back into the real world and get some friends again and feel like a normal teen.
Yes.
And that was really hard because she was not allowed with our psychiatry's like plan, she was not allowed to leave school. Even if she had hallucinations, if she had a big flare up or, self-harm thoughts, she was allowed to leave the classroom and go to the counselor's little cozy area. But she wasn't allowed to leave for a designated amount of time. So we like scaffolded back into the real world. We didn't just throw her in 5 classes. It was like, you're starting with hour 1, which is a resource room. So you don't even have to be in the classroom. And then we built and built.
That took a while just to do that. I went through the side door and then eventually I went through the front door.
Yeah.
What did that feel like for you, Taryn?
I was excited to try. I remember feeling that, but I was also just like, how am I gonna do this? Like, be around people again that aren't like doctors. And it was just crazy.
Yeah, it was really, really tough. We were also going to a DBT therapy group we had 20 weeks.
What is DBT?
DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's for folks that struggle with sort of impulse stuff. And it's all about like embracing both and thinking and like walking the middle path together of like, you don't have to just feel this or just this. It's, you can have this and both of them are okay. And
my symptoms really flared up when I was at DBT. Like a couple times we had to leave. One time I think my grandma had to come and pick us up because mom didn't feel safe driving home. Because I would just be like screaming at the top of my lungs.
Yeah, it was a challenging time, but it really taught us that Taryn needed to have some exposure to other people and places without me there so that she could build those skills back up of coping. And so, yeah, it was tough. She texted me many times like, I need to leave, you need to come get me. And I was just like, nope, can't come get you.
It reminds me of like when your child is like 2 and falls over and you have to be like, you're good.
Yep.
Walk it off like you're fine. And you're teaching their brain that it's like, this is not a problem. You're actually okay.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Right. And I don't want to equate this to be, I'm just saying,
I said
like,
that many times.
as I'm
That
sitting
just
here, I'm
helps
like,
visually.
this is like what I do with my kids even now on the regular. I'm like, oh, like, you're okay. Like, I'm sure it's fine. Right. So in total, how many hospital stays did you have?
9 admissions, but we were there probably like 12 or 13 plus times.
Yeah. What does life look like for you now? Because you're here.
Yes.
And by all accounts, I'm very curious and I just want to be blunt. Would you say you're better? Is this like an ongoing thing now? Like, I'm very curious on what life looks like for you right now.
I'm so much better than I was. Like, incredibly. I'm on a pretty high still mix of drugs and of medications and supplements that I have to take every day. But I'm going to school full time.
Amazing.
I'm doing dance. I'm doing everything.
Wow.
Actually, like last month, I got my nose pierced for 3 months self-harm free, which was a big step for me.
Yay.
Because in June, July, one of the biggest things I remember is I cut myself and I was really close to my little sister. I was at my dad's house. And I remember her looking at me and being like, well, how did you get that? And I just started bawling my eyes off. It was so awful. And there's one more thing. Sorry, I'm going a little off topic.
No,
there's one
go
more thing
ahead.
I wanted to mention that was really important.
Yeah.
It was when I had my second overdose. At night, I found... like, mom had locked up the meds, and I managed to, like, rip through the locks. Because it was, like, a foamy kind of... I don't know what it was. But it was easy. I could cut through. And I swallowed a bunch of my meds. And I went and told mom, but I was freaking out because my stomach started really hurting. I had to drink charcoal in the ambulance, and I actually, like, passed out. I don't remember it. I remember my legs were convulsing. I couldn't control them. I think that was the scariest moment for me in my whole thing because I thought I was literally going to die because my legs were like convulsing and it was like I couldn't control my own body. And I just remember being terrified. I had to get an IV. Like it was just, oh no, I had to get one put in. I didn't actually need anything from the IV, but like they do that just in case. I think that was the scariest moment of my whole story.
And how do you feel now, like even when you're telling it?
I definitely can feel some anxiety in my stomach.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel nice. I know every time I think of it, I still get intrusive thoughts like, oh, you should go back there. And I have to go, no, I'm never going back there again. Like, I don't want to be there. But I still get quite a few intrusive thoughts. I'm just better at pushing them away.
And so why do you share your story?
Because when me and mom were trying to look locally, there was nothing for us. Like, they had a lot of substance use groups for teens, and it was just that I didn't follow. I wasn't in that category. I just remember like feeling so alone, and I just wanted to make other people not feel so alone, and I felt like sharing my story was just the right thing to do.
And so right now with your page, what are the goals that you have? Because it's in tandem page, or more specifically yours, Pam, right?
Yep. Taryn doesn't do much on there other than me filming. participating in the
Yes.
content and whatever, but I'm running it basically. And our intention right from day one was to like help one person, just one person, to not feel alone and to not feel the stigma and the shame attached with a mental health challenge or diagnosis. And we really felt alone. Even though we had amazing friends and family supporting us, we didn't know anyone else that had gone through something so severe. And as soon as we started sharing Taryn's story, like the Instagram community is incredible. I know you guys know you're on socials and there's a lot of negativity, of course, as well. But we had so much outpouring of love and people messaging me who had been through similar things. And that for me was the key, because now I didn't feel alone. Even though these were complete strangers, I didn't know their story. They knew ours, and they would reach out and be like, oh, we were also in the Dubé over Christmas. Like, I'm so sorry. It's so hard. Or, you know, my daughter also attempted last week. And when you were talking about tough subjects to, you know, just the general population, people are sometimes very bothered or upset. Suicide is still not a very, you know, common topic that people want to talk about. It was nice to be able to talk about the heavy things with people that didn't react in like an overboard way, because they were just like, yeah, me too. We're living that too. We totally get it. And the amount of people that have messaged us over the last year of being on Instagram, of just thankful for hearing Taryn's perspective and giving her, you know, her story, giving people hope and a sense of belonging and community. That's really our main goal of the page, I think.
So many people were supportive.
Yeah. Well, and I think I could imagine that so much of this happens in what I'm going to say is maybe like the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And
Behind the scenes.
Yes, there are lots of people that get admitted to the Dubé Center or struggling with these issues, but it's not maybe out in public, right? And
Yeah.
it's hard to find other people,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
moms, teens,
Yes,
to
definitely.
be able to be in community with and be like, hey, you know, I actually know what you're going through, because I think you acknowledged the general public would be like not sure how to react
Totally.
with that type of information. So I'm curious, a couple things as we wrap up here. Some misconceptions that you guys would possibly like to bust, you know, around Taryn's diagnosis, around mental health, and then tools that you guys think would be really worthy of sharing, things that have worked really well for you, Taryn, and even for you, Pam, if you guys have gone through this.
The thing that pops up in the top of my head is a misconception about OCD is not just cleaning things and like checking
Go
things.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
What else is it?
there's like so many more parts about it. Like it could be, it like gives you so many intrusive thoughts. It can give you like just awful images in your head. I got so many images and videos that I did not want in my head, and then it makes you feel like it's your fault for having it.
Mm-hmm.
When
Attacks everything that you love.
Exactly, and it's just so much more than what
Yeah.
people think it is.
Mental compulsions. I didn't even know that was a thing. And that's why I didn't know that Taryn even really had OCD, because almost all of her compulsions started as mental ones, which nobody knows about if you don't share.
Well, I thought they were normal because I've been having them for so long. I was like, oh, this is just my normal brain.
It's crazy what people don't realize goes on, you know, like inside of our
yeah.
heads,
Mhm.
right? And when you're experiencing something, especially as a teen, right? And even into adulthood for sure, you don't realize sometimes what is, again, the word normal, air quotes,
Yeah.
but you know, what's going on inside of yours and not going on inside of
Yeah,
others.
exactly. I thought, oh, you know, this is just like how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So what have been some of the things that have been the most helpful for you, Taryn?
Starting back for school, the thing that helped me the most was we made a mental health toolkit. So basically we put like strong smelling lotion. There were some sour candies. We had like a journal.
Is it for sensory?
Yes, it covers all the senses, and it just, when you're struggling, you could just, something you already know what's in there. There's like a little card that had like some tools that I did, like do your box breathing and do this or that. It was so helpful. We just made a mini one for school, so it fit in my backpack. It was awesome.
How cool. And Mom, what's been helpful for you?
For me, actually, the page was very therapeutic, because at the beginning I would do a lot of writing and like really share my feelings on the page, because I was sharing Taryn's story at the time, and I really felt that was therapeutic. There would be times that late at night when I was trying to fall asleep, I would just like write, and that always has been a great way for me to process what's going on, is really just to get it out on paper and feel like it's kind of moved through you that way. So I think journaling has been really helpful for me that way. And and being able to help other people through our struggle, because I'm just a helper.
Yes.
It's literally my profession now too. And it feels good to be able to have a parent or a teen message and just say, hey, me too.
Well, and I think maybe the one other important thing to touch on, maybe that would be helpful for our listeners, is if they have teens, right? And how you guys have facilitated conversation between the two of you, because I think that that's possibly a really important piece, you know, for parents and also for teams to feel safe both ways, to be able to communicate about really difficult things. So I'm curious what your thoughts around that would be.
Yeah. So I remember at the beginning or middle-ish time with Terrence saying, so if you didn't feel comfortable reaching out to me or your grams, because not everybody has support systems at home, who would you have reached out to? And remember, like, I worked at Mobile Crisis, the place to reach out to, and I had always shared with my kids about mental health because that's the profession I'm in. So we had talked about suicide and where to reach out to. And she goes, oh, I have no idea. And I was like, okay, so this is highlighting that even a kid that should know just because of what I've told her didn't realize. Then we need to be making this messaging happen over and over, because repetition is what gets in the brain, right? Yeah. And then we're collecting data from our youth every sharing circle. I ask different questions and then they anonymously write the answers. And the number one theme that we've, you know, discovered over these last year, we've had a year's worth of sharing circles now, is my parents don't understand.
Yeah. And that's why I said that in the beginning about being able to take her seriously right away.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Parents are often downplaying what's going on, or, oh, you're just stressed, or.
And I think they're scared.
They're scared because they don't want to admit that something, you know, might be wrong with their kid.
Going
That's
on.
also not the right word, but that their kid might be struggling in some way that scares them, because mental health is still a bit scary because a lot of people don't know a lot about it, right? And so I think the key message that I always drive home to parents is ask your kids straight up, just openly, how is your mental health? Are you having thoughts of suicide? You know, like, what do you do when you struggle? Do you have a mental wellness plan? Do you have a toolbox? What are your strategies? Like, and then continually ask them all the time, because they might just be like, I'm fine, and not want to talk about it that moment, but you need to keep readdressing it. And it's your job to keep checking in with your kid, because they might not feel comfortable talking to you.
Well, and I think that I saw actually in your highlights that you had shared, and I'd listened to the episode as well, an episode by Ed Milet that he had on with, I can't remember the guy's name.
Yeah. Conquer your Everest or something.
Do you know what I mean? But it was talking about suicide prevention.
Yep.
Right? And how important that is, and that we actually are scared to like say the word and ask the question.
The guy with the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yes, I think it was that one.
We love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
We call him Daddy Milet.
That's what we call him. He's like our dad.
Yes.
We love it.
So much wisdom.
Seriously. Yeah. Anyways, but the importance of just like using that terminology, using that word, you know, being comfortable.
Yeah. People are scared to say the word because it's like, is that going to give them the idea to do it?
And
no.
They are. My dad worked in education for a really long time. And I remember when I started volunteering with youth at our church, I don't know even when we got on the conversation, but he had said to me, like, have you ever been coached in how to have a conversation if a teenager comes to you? And I was like, well, don't you just be like, hey, are you okay? And he's like, no. He's like, you have to be so specific. And I don't want to quote because I don't know all the tools, but, you know, like very specific, like, do you have plans to harm yourself? Like 100%. You have to be very upfront. And, you know, as you were saying to me about this mobile crisis, I was thinking to myself, like, not only do we need to talk to our kids about it, but we also need to give them the resource that if they need to call someone, you know, and maybe that's as simple as, I was thinking back to when we were little and we'd have like that little card that was like, call 911 if there's an emergency. Yeah. But, you know, like having those in your home
so
that says this is where you call.
We've created those. Yes. And we give them out at our sharing circles and presentations and stuff. And on the back, it just has all the crisis lines. Yep. And, you know, we actually, at the school presentations we're creating a mental wellness plan. So it says like, who can I reach out to when I'm in crisis? But before that, what can I do to keep myself safe? What are my coping strategies? What are my warning signs? Like, what happens in my body when my emotions are starting to grow really big, you know? So just getting the kids to think about those things when they're well, when they're in a good headspace, because when crisis hits, you know, our prefrontal cortex goes offline. So nobody
Lid
can
flips.
That's right. The lid is flipped. There is no more logic.
Yeah.
It's just feel, right?
Yeah. But we like to ask if you can share with us a piece of advice or something that you like to kind of like send out to the world, like to share with our audience. You can both answer it.
So the best advice I ever got was that like your mental health challenge or illness, it doesn't define you. It's going to be a part of you most likely for the rest of your life. You're always going to have struggles, but you have to get it from like the driver's seat to like the back seat of your car, which is so hard to do. Like it took me a long time, but it like won't define you. That's not, you can't just live as your illness the main thing in your life.
Good job, Taryn.
Thank you for sharing that.
And for me, I've been really learning alongside Taryn about feelings and emotions, and that, and especially as a caregiver, you're not spending time processing your own things. You're just trying to survive. But my biggest takeaway from this whole last year is when you have a feeling, don't put it in a box and put it on a shelf for later, because later doesn't come. You need to just let yourself feel it in the moment and not overanalyze and attach a whole story around it. Just let yourself feel it and let it be, and maybe name it. Be like, hey, you're there. That's cool. I see you. But then for me personally, I'm a thinker, so I would always be like, all these things. But that doesn't allow you to like process it and let it flow through your body and then release it and move on. So my biggest thing is just let yourself feel it when it comes up. And if you're in public and you start to cry, that's okay. People aren't going to judge you.
Well, it's so important to close the stress loop.
That's right.
Right? And the feedback loop. And I think so often we either shove something down, which we think we can just call back up when we need to, which we probably never remember, or it never comes back up, or we're just storing that in our body, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Which just leads to endless illness from that, right?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I feel like we could have talked for a really long time and we have so many more questions. But coming on and sharing your story, Taryn, and also yours, Pam, we want our community to know where they can find you, where they can follow you guys, and any resources that you would direct them towards.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having us here. We're very happy to share Taryn's story and to chat with you guys. You can head over to our website at www.ttyxe.ca, and we have links to crisis lines on there, and there's a support button that you can click on to find other podcasts, or we'll definitely put this one up there. And we have a bunch of books and stuff. Reading and learning about the things is really key to understanding and then supporting. And you can follow us on our socials. We're on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn.
What's your handle?
It is teens_talk YXE. And we love to connect with our community. So send us a message and we'll try and support you or point you in the right direction anyways if you need further supports.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, you guys. We enjoyed having you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.